have some time this morning to walk around and look at some things before we get into the fullness of the day. We just had some good rains 2 days in a row. We had a nice deep rain that soaked in, took the edge off of what was becoming a dry moment in the early spring. And I thought it'd be nice to walk around, look at what's happening in our garden a little bit, and then focus a bit more attention on our neighbor's space, since that's where we've been looking and working more in the last week or two. So stick around. We still have a lot of cleanup to do around our shipping site, but even with all the debris and whatnot, thought it'd be neat to show. These are all petals from the flowers of our apple tree up here. It's fully leafed out and the flowers are wrapping up. You can see the roof is actually still littered with them. The rains washed a lot of them down. I had to go up and clean the gutters a bunch of times so we could collect all the rainwater. And that'll act as our air conditioner for the whole summer, just to the south of our home. Really beautiful. It smelled lovely. It was a very strong flower presence this year. It's amazing to have all this snow on the ground in the form of petals. But I digress. The garden beds that have been set in motion, I talked about this recently with nursery in the middle and annuals on the edges. They really appreciated the deep soak that we got. I don't have a rain gauge set up yet, but I'm guessing it was a little shy of an inch, but not by much. And so the beds are rehydrated and quite happy again. And we'll do a more detailed video soon, looking at a new setup this year of cascading water containers. So the pond fills the tote, fills this container, fills another, fills another. That's been working pretty nicely for us. And if we come back into normal amounts of rain, we shouldn't need to dip into them too much. But yeah, the garden's coming along in a good way. I do want to come out here to our neighbor's spot and take a look at what's been happening out here in more detail, since this is where we've been putting a lot of effort lately. I'm going to explain these garbage bags in a moment. That's one of the things I'd like to clean up, but it is growing in a beautiful way. Beautiful way. We've got the willows taking off majestically. The elderberries in here are growing really nicely. Went through with electric push mower with the bagger on the back and did one round of mowing before the rains came. Used that as a mulch to help support some of the new plants that went in this year, but it is just taking off in here. So we're going to be needing to start pruning back probably the willows first and then the elders later on as needed, to make sure there's room to access through here. But the idea of having this very, very dense canopy early on seems to be working, and that'll reduce the amount of mowing we need to do in here pretty amazingly. And now we've got elders 2 years in that will make a huge amount of flower, and there's 4 varieties in here, so we should be able to harvest a lot of fruit from this. These are all just dormant hardwood cuttings stuck in the lawn in April of 2020. My gosh, how fast things can grow. We'll go deeper into this in another video soon. We're getting the transition between winter and early spring start of annuals for transplanting. A lot of the lettuces and kales that we now have in the garden came from in this space. We talked about this a little ways back. Maybe it's too late, but we're going to still try to lift and plant out into the garden some of these broccoli types, some more lettuces, some nursery stock, kale and mustard and anise hyssop all mixed together. We can still transition them out so long as it's cool and moist when we do it, and that when we lift these plants we cut them back a bit. So we'll harvest a big salad while we transplant, and then they should be able to survive that. But what we're trying to do is make some room so we can set in motion what this high tunnel will be about for the summer. So there's hot peppers going in everywhere that there are little miscanthus stalks, or varieties of hot peppers in between the chard and the kale. So we'll harvest the chard and the kale assertively right around those peppers until they become the canopy, and then they can cast shade to the greens underneath them. We'll see how that works. And then the plan will be, in this whole row will be where our tomatoes go, and we'll just basically make a nook. So we'll harvest a really thorough salad, pop in a tomato as the spinach is finishing up making their seed right down the line, and then they can be trellised up through here. So trying to figure out a blended transition from both annual early cool weather crops. We've been eating tons of salads and getting lots and lots of mustards and greens for cooking, and having it be, rather than erase everything, start from scratch for the summer, have these two parts of the season transition and blend back and forth. On the flip side, when we're in, August, I'd like, when the tomatoes are growing, to sow carrots and beets and lettuces under them to have a fall crop and a winter crop set in motion. This far end got pretty thoroughly overrun with wild mustard. We ate them for quite a while, and once we're ready to actually plant, we'll pull all these, send them to the chickens as a huge greens treat, and plant it out that day. But there's no point right now in ripping them out prematurely. It's a great browse for bees, and they're really beautiful. I thought I'd take a look at what's new as of this spring. Across the driveway there are these air prune boxes. I feel really good about where we are with them. So this was needed in order to address just an absolute overflow of tree seeds that we collected that we needed to find homes for. And I've talked about air prune boxes in the past. I'll link here to an unboxing video showing us taking them apart. It's not a huge departure from how we've built these in the past, but I feel like there's some really thorough upgrades in these. The boxes are 2 foot by 4 foot, and they're modular. They're meant to be able to stack. It almost looks like a long beehive, but you can see the box has an air gap underneath. There's a mesh there. So even though there's mulch right next to it, there is ultimately air underneath these, and that's filled with compost and soil mix. Then we put an empty riser, and depending on the type of tree we are growing, we have a 6-inch bottom and then 4 inches, 4 inches. So that gives us 14 inches of space for the roots to develop. And this one happens to be Carpathian walnut, planted on April 22nd. And this has probably around 200 tree seeds in there. So each of these boxes have really high value trees that we're growing from seed. Carpathian walnut, there's a low tannin white oak, there's some massive hickory, there are some really nice cultivar hazelnuts. And then a friend of mine, turns out they have, we'll just say, an indoor growing operation, and they need to find homes for the leftover potting mix. They were getting ready to dump it because they weren't sure what to do with it. And so we decided to make these really rich garden beds. A lot of perlite. I wouldn't necessarily buy this, but it was a waste stream. And so now we've got perennial leeks transplanted out from the high tunnel, along with New Jersey tea and Amorpha nana and some perennial sunflower. So as we finalize digging up from the high tunnel the nursery stock that was set in motion in February, we can move those out to here. They get a really beautiful growing space for the season. We can dig them up in the fall and then think about transitioning these beds into covered spaces for the winter. But this took a good bunch of days to set this place in motion. But from being a lawn a few weeks ago to the capacity to grow maybe 2,000 to 4,000 trees from seed and a whole bunch of nursery stock, as well as nice mounds of compost to do squash and the like, felt like a pretty nice upgrade. We filmed a lot of the process of making these air prune boxes. Let me know in the comments. It takes some doing to edit that kind of stuff. These sorts of videos are much easier to make, but if there's interest, I absolutely will put together a video showing the step-by-steps of how we came to this design. So just let me know. Side note would be, we discovered here, this is an overflow after it rains. This was a drainage ditch that was put in a bunch of years ago, and we dug down quite a bit deeper before the rains came and made this dam out of subsoil. You can see it's overflowing here. So now we've got this opportunity. We put a little pump in, plug in the solar panel, and we can lift water from this little ditch. It basically runs up the slope. Talking with the neighbor around harvesting out way more of this lawn, so we'll make a call to dig safe and make sure it's okay to do that. But this might be a rice paddy production area, as well as a way to collect a few thousand gallons of extra bonus water after a good rain. You can see every drop that's coming over the dam, that ultimately will run to the road and is not able to be put to use in this landscape. So it's basically free water. And our idea is to fortify these dams, figure out their final depth, and then put a huge piece of shale to protect the mud, but then also make these cascading waterfalls. So it'll add a sound element to this as well. Lots of little bonus stuff in here from what are basically waste streams. And that little pump lifts and puts it into this container, makes it convenient to water from here. We just dip in and we can water those boxes. And then this has an overflow that we can connect to that piece of PEX that goes to some rice paddy production over there. So it's a way to have water that's leaving the landscape hop the watershed and go back into really productive areas. As that runs, it ultimately meanders, fills a couple ponds, and ends up to the north of our home in the chicken yard. So if we do it right and we have the pump set up in a good way, we could be getting them fresh flowing water that would otherwise be headed directly out, goes into a ditch next to the road where it picks up juices off the road and goes to a lake. So rather have it meander. Of course, there's always more to organize and clean up. As I'm making this video, I'm just seeing like the random buckets and the random containers, but that's all part of the process. We're still getting caught up in the spring here from shipping and local sales and just figuring all that out. I'll wrap it up here. We've got this nice garden space perched over the pond that's starting to get a lot deeper in its design and evolution. We're going thorough with deep hay for the walkways as our weed management. And you can see where we have these little pots of what we're growing, some other sorts of plants that we can just break up over time and use as a really convenient place to start seeds. Which again, I don't know that I would be buying in so much perlite and coir and peat, but if it exists and it's a burden to somebody else, it seems amazing to fold it in here. Since we have really dense clay soil, that material is actually going to benefit things quite a bit. But yeah, neighbors have been plugging in kales. We've got this whole bed seeded out to beets and carrots. Now that the rains have come, it's starting to really wake up. So it's very exciting. We've been collaborating with them more and more. We're sharing meals. We worked together yesterday for quite a bit of time. So it's all merging in some really lovely ways. And then on the hot days, we go swimming. So that's always wonderful too. Anyway, that is an update video on how the food forest conversion from a lawn is progressing. Just for reference, this whole space we've looked at was a mowed lawn in the spring of 2020, and it is this now. I am interested to know what it will be in 2024 as the years progress, but we're in no rush. We're actively in the process, but it's just a good reminder that if the question is, well, I don't know if I should put in the time and effort to convert a space over, it takes forever before you start getting food from it, that's pretty profoundly incorrect. Things start happening pretty quickly. We got a fair bit of food in 2020. Lots of potatoes came out of this system. We got lots and lots of food last year. We were able to harvest rice and sea berries. And this year we're going to have enough food and medicine coming out of this space that an invitation to more folks to come help harvest will certainly be appropriate. So it moves quickly. It's profoundly and deeply worth doing. And in the comments, share notes. What are you doing this year to grow more food? What sort of support or ideas or hopes do you have that you'd like to share with others and get input and feedback and words of encouragement? Let's have some dialogue down there and keep increasing the amount of space that's growing food for everybody. That's my long-winded spiel. Have a lovely day.